Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. There are few topics as contentious as that of what is known as woke. And I have really been wanting to have somebody on that could talk intelligently about this subject. And I finally got somebody. He's an author, a public speaker, and founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. Adam B. Coleman, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, before we get into the woke stuff, I'd just tell us a little bit about yourself and your views.
Sure. I have varying viewpoints. I tend to be more middle of the road as far as my approach. On certain topics, I'm a little bit liberal. In certain topics, I'm a little bit more conservative. But I try to have a rational viewpoint on things and not feed into the hysteria. So when it comes to woke, I think sometimes it's a little bit over exaggerated. And I think there are certain instances where the concern is legitimate, absolutely legitimate. So I think it just really depends what area, but not everything is woke. Just like, for example, discussing race doesn't mean you're woke. Like we discussed race prior to the term being in the lexicon. And pointing out racism doesn't mean you're woke. Like sometimes there's racism, sometimes there's anti-Semitism, sometimes there are hateful things that happen that are unfair, and it's okay to talk about it or to address it or to bring it up. It doesn't make you a Black Lives Matter sympathizer to point out like, hey, there are actually bad people who are doing these things. And not every negative thing that happens against someone who is Black or non-white, to be honest with you, because that's the direction of woke. Anything that happens against someone who's a racial minority or non-white is due to hatred or some sort of implicit bias. Sometimes it's just there are certain scenarios that are just tend to be negative, or it wouldn't happen no matter what the person looked like. So I think there's just a lot of nuance when it comes to all of this. And I think the emotions of things makes people ignore them.
You know, it's difficult because, like you said, there is racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm somebody, I don't like, that's not my go-to, right? If something happens, I don't jump to racism as the reason. For instance, I mean, I'm Jewish. I'm not religious, but I'm Jewish by birth. And I don't like to say, oh, this person's anti-Semitic, but sometimes it's difficult. Like when you have what's going on in Israel right now with the war, and you have these protesters, and I don't want to jump in and just say, oh yeah, it's just anti-Semitism, but sometimes it is. And it's the same thing with racism, right? It's like, I remember when I was incarcerated, I had a friend of mine who everything that happened to him, he claimed was race. It's racism. They're not giving me the good jobs in prison because it's racism. And it's like, you think it might just be because you're not good? Like, does that ever occur to you? You're just not a good carpenter. I'm not a good carpenter, but that was the shop we were in. And my thing to him was, when you claim racism, when it's not, what you do is you make people numb to the term. So then when real racism happens, people don't want to hear it, because they're listening to you. But then when real racism does happen, it needs to be addressed, and it makes it a very delicate sort of balance to strike, because I don't want to absolve anybody of racism, but at the same time, I don't want to accuse people of racism. I mean, I've been mugged before when I was a teenager going into, projects to buy drugs, whatever. I've been robbed. I could easily say, well, they robbed me because I'm white. They probably robbed me because they wanted money and they wanted to put it in their pocket. You know what I mean? So I like the perspective that you bring. And I like this article that I read that you wrote from August about the right now becoming, hyper race consciousness. But I'll get to that in a bit. But before we do, how would you define woke? Because this is a term that is really, it evades definition, and it makes clarity of communication difficult when different people mean different things by the term.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a language battle as well as a culture war. And that's attached to the culture war. It's the definition of words. What is racism, right? Certain people think it's power plus privilege, and other people just think it's any sort of negative action happened towards someone because of the race, let's just say, or a hatred of someone because of the race. I think most people prescribe to the latter, that racism is someone who hates someone else or has negative feelings about someone else because of the race. So, it kind of goes in the same realm of woke. What is woke? It's different for different people. Other people are trying to define it. There are certain people who are Black who recognize that woke was a term of awareness that was in, within Black Twitter or Black intelligentsia. They would say to each other, where they're aware of their surroundings and they were more race conscious, but aware that there are negative things that are happening around them, not necessarily in a neo-Marxist standpoint, but just being aware that there are unfairness about society and we're woke to what's going on, right? That was kind of the idea. Then woke turned more into the neo-Marxist viewpoint. And that's when you started seeing, I remember years ago, you started seeing white college students calling themselves woke, right? So it wasn't an epithet. It was something that they embraced. I am woke too. I'm woke with my Black brothers and sisters. I am woke as well. So it morphed into that. And then what started happening was woke was starting to be weaponized and used against them. So when something ridiculous would happen, the right started using their own term, the woke, and started lambasting them with it. And actually, that is one of the language battles I think the right has won, because now the left doesn't like being called woke, right? So that's actually one of the few battles that the right has won, where now they're like, they want nothing to do with woke, right? They don't call themselves woke anymore. Why? Because the right has taken it and beaten them over the head with it constantly by calling them woke. Now, can it be overused as far as a weapon? Sure. And I think we're at that point where it is being overly applied to things and it's losing its sting, right? Now everything is woke. Now things that are legitimate are being labeled as woke. And that's where the right can sometimes go a little bit too far. I'm not trying to be unfair when I say the right, because there's millions upon millions of people that fall into that category.
Generalizations, you have to
Yeah.
make them at times to illustrate a point, but I get what
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are definitely people who are influential. I like to stick with that. One-off people, there are crazy one-off people who apply whatever to whatever. But there are influential people that exist on the right who, for effect, call things that they don't like woke.
Right.
Whether it is or isn't is a different story. They just overly apply it. It's a catch-all term to get a reaction from people, to get subscribers, to get money and all this other stuff, to get attention. But it loses its sting. And I think it's at that point where it's starting to lose its sting. And I will say, now that we're talking about it, I don't see it said as much as I did maybe 6 months ago. I think it's starting to lose its relevancy, and people are moving on to other things.
Political correctness, it seems, fits into this debate as well, or this discussion. And what I mean is this, like, I have a friend of mine that I've known for, I don't know, 20 years, Black guy. He and I say things to each other in private that if people on the outside heard us talking to each other, we'd be canceled. You know what I mean? We'd be done. Now, the thing is, he and I are friends. We're joking with each other, right?
Right.
And like, if someone says, oh, you guys shouldn't talk to each other like that, to me, like, that's being politically correct. And I think that goes too far. But I also think that politically correct can be used as an accusation or as a cover to actually say things that shouldn't be said, right? That are not nice. Let me put it that way. That are cruel to say, that are not nice to say. And someone says, oh, you're being politically correct to tell me I can't say it. And that's like another one of these balances that I think it's difficult to strike. Have you come across that at all? And if so, like what in what areas?
I would say on the same level. Actually, I'll give you a perfect example. I don't do this too often because especially when you're on Twitter, you see all types of stuff. And now that it's a little bit less policed, more of the unsavory characters start to come onto Twitter. So I know what it is. And so people understand I'm a free speech advocate, right? So at no point do I say these people should not say these things. They must be removed for saying these things. What my purpose is to point out the existence of certain things that are happening and the illogical things that are happening. I don't say that people can't say it. I'm actually all for the hateful people saying exactly what they feel. So now it's in the open. Now I know where you stand. So I know, okay, I can block you now.
Yes.
I thank you for saying these things. Now I can choose to not be around you rather than pretend that we're one and the same and we're alike. And because you're using a clever language to hide how you really feel. Thank you for telling me how you really feel. But one of the things I've noticed for a while, and once in a while I bring it up, is when I call it the in group and out group, right? So we'll go by racial terms. If there is a white conservative who sees something that a black person does in a video, let's just say shoplifting, fights, those type of things that circulate. The negative is what is normal, right, for the out group. And so that's the image of the out group that they have. Why? Because more than likely, they're not around black people. They're probably not in a very multicultural area, but they're specifically not around black people. So the media that they consume verifies their bias, verifies their ignorance. And so I'm just going to use the term because I'm comfortable using it. The niggas, the niggas become the black people, right? And they don't, they have trouble delineating the niggas versus every other rational-minded black person that exists in our society. Whether
which are far more, which are far more,
right? Which are far more, right? But to them, the out group, the worst of the out group becomes what is common. The best of the in group becomes what is common. So the videos that do circulate of white people doing something bad, right? Like, for example, maybe there is a white cop that is doing something negative towards a black person, right? They don't see that as a white issue, right? They see that as a cop issue. No, that's just that person. That is that thing. Oh, that's authority figure, right? They don't see that as a white issue. But a black criminal, it is a black culture problem. It's a black problem. And that becomes the race part. All of a sudden becomes very important, right? So what I was doing was I came across this video of a black woman who's in a Starbucks, who was, by all means, in the wrong, overreacting, going crazy, because of some dispute between her and the manager. She's throwing stuff and she's acting wild and calling up her son, wanting her son to come down there so he can get caught up in this and possibly go to jail because he do something stupid, right? So she is in the wrong. So it's not to say that she's in the right because she's a black woman. She's in the wrong, no matter what color she is. But the comments, all the comments, monkey, N, right? They put N instead of saying what they really want to say. Confirming the stereotype, just racial epithets, insulting language, boom, 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 just one after the other, filled with it. And then I brought up another video of two white boys in a suburb fighting each other. And actually, it was three. It was two trying to go against one. And the one was a bigger kid. And he ended up slamming one kid to the concrete. I don't know what happened to that kid. He was out. Right. So this is violent content between three white people. No one brought up race. Race wasn't a factor. They're just commenting on the fight that happened. Right. And I said, I created a post and I took all these screenshots, and I was like, this is funny how in this instance, it is because this woman is Black, that is why she's acting this way. But the 3 white kids who got into a fight, oh, it's just a fight. Fights just happen, right? And matter of fact, the one screenshot that I had copied of the fight that someone commented, because I was scrolling through, no one brought up race, except for one person who brought up, funny how no one's mentioning anything about the race. Or actually, they were saying how I thought only fights happen with Black people, like in a sarcastic manner, right? And then what followed after that? You can bet what followed after that, after that comment. So one person said, because there was no fried chicken around, you know, some stupid shit like that.
Very clever.
Very clever. I didn't say white supremacists are the funniest. They're usually terrible at humor. But I pointed these things out to my followers, right? Just to point it out, because I could do this every day if I wanted to. I could scour Twitter and find all this stuff, but I just happened to do it that day because it stuck out to me. And what did I get accused of being? A snowflake. You know, why are you crying about this? And I said, you know, that's funny, because if I talked about Democrats being terrible every day, you wouldn't accuse me of crying, would you?
Never. Nope.
And I said, it's because this is a thing that you don't like that is true that I am pointing out. That is why you're trying to use language calling me sensitive and oh, stop being a snowflake and all these different things. But what was most revealing is what wasn't said. What was most revealing was the person that I was talking about. Actually, one of the screenshots, the person I was talking about was talking about like how the race of Black people commit these crimes and do X, Y, and Z, right? And the people wanted to focus on that one. And I said, it's very interesting that you guys skipped over the N, monkey, baboon, the showing of side-by-side picture of a Black woman and a monkey, right? You guys skipped over that stuff to point out the disproportionate crime that happens by Black people. That's very interesting that you guys did that. And to me, that's very revealing. Sure. Because if I go into a room of 10 people and 8 of them are calling me names because I am Black, but 2 of them are making legitimate arguments about different things, I still wouldn't hang around that room and give that room legitimacy. I would be like, you know what? I don't believe that your arguments are coming from the same type of place, because amongst these group of people, you still hang out with them, you still around them, and you're falling in line with all this other stuff. Like, I can't find nuance in hatred. I can't find nuance in calling people niggers, right? I can't find nuance in that. No. There is no nuance. So it's to go to the original point. Even when you point out legitimate things and you point out the nuance in it, and you make fair comparisons, right? Someone will always call you a snowflake for pointing out something that they don't like. Right.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I find that the people that use that term snowflake are often the most easily offended.
They are. Yes, they are.
You know, very much so. They want to be able to say whatever they want, but they don't want to be able to take it back in kind. Even when it's not in a, you know, what would normally be considered offensive, it's just a critique. Mm-hmm. A big part of this discussion relates to woke, and I've come across a lot. I came across in your writing, is race consciousness. What does it mean to be race conscious?
So race conscious basically just means that whatever situation you enter in life, whether it's going to work, whether it's going on the subway, applying for a job, whether it's something significant or mundane, race is on your mind as to the outcome, the reaction, your experience in life. So from a leftist standpoint, they want everyone to be race conscious, right? Because they'll say stuff like, because as a Black person, Black people have to be race conscious in everything that they do, right? Because racism is abundant. And so how they're treated in society, they have to be conscious of their race constantly because people are treating them differently than everyone else in every aspect of society. So if Black people have to be race conscious, so do you, right? That's their rationalization. Now, I think what the right doesn't understand is being race conscious doesn't mean that you agree with leftist lingo, or that you agree with the leftist terms, or their framing of things. They just want you to be race conscious. And whether you're on the side of agreeing with why you should be race conscious or not, they just want you race conscious. And what happens is when you become race conscious, you basically become race paranoid, right? and you live your life just like, was the person at McDonald's rude to me because I was white and they were Black? Or was it because they were having a bad day? Or maybe this person is just an asshole. Like, I have no idea why. But if you become race conscious and you see race in everything, the Black woman that was at the McDonald's was racist. She doesn't like white people. That's why she treated me this way. If you enter a particular situation, if there's a Black politician who wants something in particular that you don't like, it's because of Black people. They're doing this and that. And it's because I'm white, right? It becomes a victim complex for everybody, right? Not just for Black people, but for everyone. Did I lose you? Are you still there?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. I think your screen had froze.
Oh, okay.
No. So the whole objective is to make everyone conscious of what they are, but even more so. So, and I've tried to say this to people. I've spent my entire life being around white people. I've lived in racially diverse areas. I've lived in rural areas, majority white areas. And the one thing that was very common amongst white people and how they saw themselves was not as white people. It was very common for them to see themselves as Italian, Jewish, Polish, Irish, Scottish, whatever. They usually, 9 times out of 10, associated with something else other than their race. The only time white people were ever willing to associate themselves with race was when they were pushed into the position of associating themselves with race. And so when you see like the reaction from George Floyd, let's just say, for example, it became Black versus white. And if you fit into the category of white and they're labeling you as racist, you're labeling you as this and that, you become defensive and draw back into that category of race because you fit into that category as to how they're framing it. And the more they do that, the more conscious you become of it, right? When you turn on the TV and you see that there are more Black people on than there were before, and there are less white people that are on before, is that because they're trying to get rid of white people within commercials, within TV shows, right? And you become aware of that, right? Something's different about my country. Something's different about the entertainment, the news. How come when a Black person does something bad, they don't mention their race? But when a white person does something bad, they mention their race. That seems like it's directed at me. And you know what? It might be, but the whole objective is to make you see that. The whole objective is to make you race conscious, right? And then what ends up happening, because I've watched it, I've watched the psychology of this expand over the past 2-3 years. What ends up happening is the extended level that they went to prove that white people are doing bad things caused a counter reaction to show that there's Black people who are doing bad things, right? And it's become this tit for tat, my team versus your team, in group versus out group. It's created this weird schism from people, I think some people who actually were good, rational-minded conservatives, right-leaning people who have been tricked into becoming race conscious, tricked into holding on to this racial identity that they didn't give two shits about before, right? If you walked up to them and say, hey, what are you? Oh, I am, 1/3 Scottish, 1/3 Italian. Like, they would say, oh, my grandmother's from this. But now they're being forced more and more often to see themselves as white, right? And I think back to like the civil rights movement. All types of problems happen when you started saying this is white people, it's for colored people. And you started dividing society by that. I think everything negative comes from that aspect of them against us, and splitting us apart. Now, the only caveat, and I've sort of shifted a little bit on this, is when Black people see themselves as being Black, it is not necessarily as a counter to white. Because of American history of slavery and things of that nature, they don't have that direct lineage to an outside country like a lot of white Americans do. A lot of white Americans are actually like second, maybe third generation here. A lot of Black Americans have been here much longer lineage-wise. So for them to see themselves as Black is the same way as an Italian person sees themselves as Italian, right? It's the impetus to capitalize the B in Black when the Associated Press is writing articles, rather than seeing it as just a color, right? It is a cultural reference, but it's not necessarily meant for hatred or anything like that. You wouldn't say if someone called themselves a Polish American as they are being anti-American and hateful of everybody else who isn't Polish. It is the same viewpoint for a lot of Black Americans. They see themselves as being Black, and that's it. But it is a personal identity. That is the only difference that I have when it comes to what Black people seeing themselves as Black and white people seeing themselves as white, right? Because it's abnormal for white people to wholly see themselves as white and and pull for white things. Like, it's very weird. It's unusual.
The victim thing really resonates with me because I'll give you an example. I don't know if you know, but I was in prison for 25 years. And I would be in a block and there'd be a jerk for an officer on. It was a jerk to everybody. And literally the same guy, I would hear Black guys say, you see how this dude, he looks out for all the white boys. He doesn't look out for us. The white guys would say, you see how he treats us because we're white, but he doesn't treat the Black guys like that. And it's the same guy. And it's like they're just dying to see somebody mistreating them because of their race. And this victim thing, for years, the conservative movement or conservatives would talk about, Blacks need to stop playing the victim. They need to stop blaming the past and take responsibility. And that resonates with me because I agree. People need to get over the past, my past, your past, whatever, and move forward. But I find it interesting now that the conservative movement, I don't even like calling it that anymore. The Trump movement, the MAGA movement, is a victim ideology. It's all about, our jobs are being shipped overseas. The immigrants are taking our jobs. Woke is rampant. Everybody's victimizing us. And it's just like, wait a second, what happened to take responsibility and get over it and, move on? You had that idea when it was Blacks who have been through far more in this country. Right. But now you want to play the victim. And a similar dynamic happens for a lot of years. African Americans, rightly or wrongly, have drawn attention to corruption in the FBI, to an unfair justice system. And people on the right scoffed at them. Oh, you stop committing crime and you won't have to worry about it. But now that it's Trump, their guy, all of a sudden I'm hearing about how the FBI is corrupt and it's a two-tier justice. And I'm like, wait a second. And then they don't get why if I'm a Black guy and I say, wait a second here, for my entire study in Black history, people that have looked like me have been making these complaints and they fell on deaf ears. But now all of a sudden you're making them. I'm thinking something's wrong with that. But the MAGA people don't seem to get it. Do you see that same dynamic taking place?
Yes, all the time. And I try not to beat a dead horse. I occasionally make my points. But Trump is the magnet for victimhood for them, right? So everything that happens to Trump, it was outside of Trump's control. Look at everything that they're doing against him. And it's not to say that Trump is not being treated fairly, because I think in certain situations he isn't. But there are certain things that they say, and I'm like, well, like Trump is involved in that, right? Trump's worst enemy is himself, in my opinion. Many of the things that he has done, he has stepped in it, right? And he's gravitated towards it, and he didn't care, right? And people loved, oh, he doesn't care, he doesn't care. He's fighting them, right? But then when they kick back, when they go back at him, then they're like, I can't believe they're doing this to him. They don't understand that the energy you put out, if Trump is aggressive, let's just take the premise that there is this deep state, all this stuff that's happening, and Trump is the only man who can fight them. So when Trump fights them, you guys are, shaking your fist, go ahead at Trump. But when they fight back, you're like, I can't believe they're doing this. Why are they doing this to Trump? And it's because he's fighting someone, and he's fighting something powerful, according to you. So you cannot be surprised when the powerful entity fights back against him. And like, I don't understand, like, no one would be surprised if, like when the American military went into Afghanistan, no one's surprised when Al-Qaeda shoots back, I'm sorry, the Taliban shoots back. Like, no one's surprised.
Yeah.
They invaded the country and they're fighting the Taliban. So both sides are shooting at each other. You can't be shocked when the other side shoots back. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of excuse making. I'm seeing the election was stolen, that's why he lost. I'm seeing stuff like that. And I'm thinking to myself, the election, let's say that, and I think every election has some sort of like fishy business that happens, but I don't even think it should have been close. Like, Joe Biden didn't campaign, right? And on top of that, and I think that when it comes to an incumbent president, usually the incumbent president has an advantage, right? Because the other person says, here's what I would do, right? As the incumbent president, now you get to run on your record. If it's a good record, you get to say, here's what I've done, and I will keep doing these things. And people are usually more likely to support that very thing. So as an incumbent president, he still lost, right? And he has the advantage because he has the record to show for it. So if the election became about Trump, it wasn't about Biden, right? And that's, I think, the part that people aren't understanding who are supportive of Trump, is that they're really hoping and praying that there are more people that hate what Biden is doing than hate Trump, right? Like, they're really hoping and praying. And I just wrote an article for the New York Post talking about some recent polling coming out from key battleground states where Trump is ahead. But mind you, these are polls. These are 3,000 people who are registered voters that were polled, right? It is an indication, but it is not everything, right? We saw all types of polling before that Trump might win, and he lost. So they're not everything. They could be a sign of something. There could be a reaction to it. There could be changes that the Democrats do. Who knows, right? There could be something that Trump does in the meantime that screws it up. So I guess what I'm getting at is I see victim ideology being perpetuated all over the place. And I think that there are, unfortunately, aren't enough people to look at themselves the same way that they will look at the other side, to see the hypocrisy, where they complain about cancel culture on one side, but then do cancel culture on their side. When they say boycotts are terrible, that this is a terrible thing to do, and then they're like, boycotts work. Whoa, look at that boycott. Like, to me, I'm just realizing more and more, especially for the past year, that when I wrote my book, I talked about the thing that I loved about conservatism was the accountability aspect, was the ability to look at themselves and say, what can I do better? Or what could I have done better? To accept individualism, right? To not just see me as a Black person, but to see me as Adam first, right? And the Black is whatever it is. Like, these are the things that I like. And what I'm seeing is this weird hodgepodge of calling themselves conservatives, but doing very non-conservative things, calling themselves Christians, but doing very un-Christian-like things, right? Many of those people who are saying ends, monkeys, and all this stuff in their bios, they got Christian. and that's the very hypocrisy that I'm seeing from all over the place. And I think human beings are hypocritical. Even me, I'm sure there's something I do that's hypocritical. But the thing is, if you point it out, I'll be like, you know what, you're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for many of these people, when you point it out, they do not like it. They say, well, no, it's not the same. Oh, of course, it's not the same when you do it. It's always different. So it's that kind of thing that I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I make mistakes, but I've openly talked about where I made mistakes, where I shifted my viewpoints because I was wrong, right?
Yeah.
I have some humility and understanding about my humanity, and I'm just seeing a lot of ego that exists within the political in the political realm, where they're always right, and you can rewind a year before, and the very thing that they're saying now is completely different to what they were saying before, without the I was wrong before, right? It's just they just moved on to the new narrative, right? There's no acknowledgement that they even said that before, right? And if you call them on it, they'll say, well, no, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant, right? Yeah. It's like Fauci. Fauci, oh, I didn't say that. It's like, Fauci, we recorded you.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm seeing it all over the place. And that's why I think it's important to have an honest media that isn't super, super biased. I try to write as many articles as possible criticizing both sides, right? And I'm not going to lambast Democrats 24/7. And when I talk to my Republican friends, one of my really good friends is a former candidate Republican, and we complain about Republicans all the time, right? Because they're doing stupid stuff, right? So I think that's what makes a healthy country, is to stop seeing yourself as perfect, stop seeing you as being the best and the other side is just absolutely horrible,
Right?
And start seeing like most of the people see the same type of problem, they just have different solutions, and not everybody who's on the opposite side is the devil, right? So I think that's what we need more of. We need more nuance, we need some discourse, but we need humility. And I think we're lacking that, especially in politics.
Well, I like what you said right there about the other side might just disagree as to the solution to a problem. So I've read Robin DiAngelo, Ibram X. Kendi, a lot of the critical race theory stuff, Black Lives Matter. And there's a few things in there. One is when they say, like, if you don't support this, you're a racist. And it's a policy. Like, say they say affirmative action. If you don't support this, then that you're a racist. Well, let's just assume I'm wrong about affirmative action because I don't support it, right? Why the assumption that it's because I don't want to help Black people? Maybe I don't think it will help.
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe I don't think the policies you're advocating will actually achieve the results that you think they will. And again, you may say I'm wrong, but to then ascribe a motive of racism to me, that tells me that there's more going on here than just you're advocating on behalf of a given race. Like Black Lives Matter, it's a nice slogan, and like, who the hell is going to disagree? No, they don't. You know what I mean? Nobody. But Black Lives Matter is about far more than Black lives. I mean, it's riddled with Marxism. It's about getting, changing definitions of terms in terms of gender and whatnot, and agree or disagree. That's not my point. My only point is it's about more than Black lives. And that stuff, it creates a reaction, I guess. But beyond that, I'm interested to know, how influential are these things? Woke, anti-racism, critical race theory, Black Lives Matter. Because I've had while I am not in favor of any of those, right?
Mhm.
I've had people that would say they're on my side politically say, oh, you're always criticizing the right. You never criticize the left, but the left is the far bigger threat. First of all, it's not true that I don't criticize the left. I do all the time. I'm accused by one side and then the other of always favoring the other side. But I really don't see those ideologies as the threat that many people take them to be. I think they're dangerous in the sense that I think that irrationality is dangerous and should be opposed all the time. I don't think it's going to be beaten by an anti-woke MAGA agenda that's just as irrational. But
Right.
how rampant are those things? How, or not rampant, I guess, how influential? Like in reading critical race theory, when people tell me they're teaching this to elementary school kids, no, they're not. They're just not. It's a complex legal theory. There's no way you're teaching this to 9-year-olds.
Right.
But I'm just curious what you think about it.
Well, critical race theory is another one of those terms that is certain people it's a catch-all for neo-Marxism, and for other people, like you said, it's a legal theory. So everybody has these different terms. But to answer your question, I think that, and it's actually a very good question, because if we see it this way, that it's only happening, I didn't say only, it's primarily happening amongst select groups of people, then we would start to say, all right, let's be more targeted as far as where we're criticizing things, or how the policies we're trying to put into place and things like that. And we would have more optimism about our country when we see, like, actually, it's a very select group of people that really believe this stuff, right? Then we would be like, okay, so then most people don't agree with this stuff. And so the thing that I've written about and I've noticed is that there's a common factor when it comes to the people who really truly believe in this stuff, and it's an economic factor, and it's an economic and social factor. They tend to be upper middle class and above that truly believe in this. The elite institutions wholly are into this stuff, right? And a lot of people are waking up to, like, the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas stuff in colleges, right? Say, oh my God, I was Black Lives Matter, and the Black Lives Matter people are for this stuff. They're supporting the terrorists. Like, and I'm like, yes, because if you paid attention to their ideology, none of this would surprise you.
Exactly.
But the thing is, this is not something that regular people who have real problems and real lives who have to worry about, can I afford to replace the boiler that broke in my home? Or do I have enough money to actually buy a home because of raising interest rates? Like, real people with real problems aren't dissecting the nuances of this bullshit that they're spreading.
Yeah, they're not concerned with intersectionalities and stuff like that, right?
Right. They're like, you're an asshole. or are you a decent person? Because and that's, I've kind of just taken this on because this is just who I am. When I write, I'm trying to speak for the majority of people, right? Because most people are working, middle class, or maybe even they're poor, right? Who are just trying to go day by day and just trying to have the best lives they possibly can for themselves and their family. That's my general thesis. No matter what they look like, they're trying to survive amongst a bit of chaos that exists in our society, and they're trying to appreciate the little blessings that they do have, right? And what I see is pessimism from the people who are the most fortunate in our society, right? They talk about race, they talk about gender, sexuality, they talk about all these things that why people discriminate and how they see themselves different. But the thing they never talk about is economic status. They never talk about, hey, are the upper class elites treating everybody who is below them differently? They don't talk about that. They completely gloss over that. They might say racism is keeping Black people from climbing the economic ladder, right? But they never talk about being at the top of the ladder themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it's very strategic, and it's the elephant in the room that they constantly try to ignore. You know, I just see, like, my old CEO is a millionaire, and like, was it one of his kids is a communist, the other one's a socialist, like, and I'm just like, how, as a man who built himself up, right? He didn't come from a rich family. He was a humble guy who was kind of poor and built himself up from the middle class and above, and now he's a millionaire, and he's fortunate enough to send his kids to the best institutions in the world. And his kids turn out to be socialists who think that the world is unfair and we need to do more for everybody else. And I'm just like, how is this happening? But and he's a conservative, right? He's a Trump supporting conservative. So like, it's that kind of weird situation that happens. And it's not to say that every rich person is a socialist and all this other stuff, but there is a disconnect that happens, right? It's a bubble that they live in, and they're not seeing what the world is like for most people, right? And they have the luxury to hyper analyze the most nuances of things. Like, I am fortunate now that I kind of have a luxury to analyze the nuances of stuff, right? But I try to be rational about it. I try to be realistic about my analysis. But for these people, this is ideological, right? They could spend hours, they could spend the entire career focused on this stuff, pushing papers at DEI conferences, right? They can do all this stuff that in the end run generates nothing, right? It generates no money, but they have like these the BS kind of industries that stem from the upper class elite to give their mediocre children jobs because they have college degrees. Like, you just see, I'm just looking at all of this, and I was like, how come every person that is in the media who really truly believes this stuff went to private schools, went to Ivy League schools? You know, most of them came from wealthy backgrounds. And if they didn't come from a wealthy background, they probably came from a middle class, upper middle class background. The people who are saying that marriage is trivial and this and that, and are ultra feminists, had both their parents in the home and they get married. Like, it's like this weird situation, but that is like the commonality, is that they tend to be upper middle class and above. And if they're not that, they have the mentality of an elitist, right? Like, they're a rich person on the come up who can't wait to take over the world, and they want to align themselves with the rich elitists and say, yes, the elitists are correct here. We must change everybody. There is something wrong with you, poor white person that's in flyover country, right? That I've never met before, and I have no idea what it's like to walk in their shoes. There's something wrong with you. And if you just listen to what we tell you to do, then you might have a better life, right? But unfortunately, you're not smart enough to know these things. I know better than you. See, I went to an elite institution. I have a graduate's degree. So maybe you should just like stop with your white privilege and listen. And mind you, this goes for everybody. It doesn't matter what your nationality is, or your country of origin. Maybe you're an immigrant. It doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. That none of that stuff matters. They will say the same exact thing and have the same ideological beliefs and do the same contradicting stuff all across the board, because they're of an upper middle class and above economic status, and they believe that they are the chosen people of society, and they have this idea in their head that they need to tell us what to do, and that we're just too dumb to do the right things. It's an elitist mentality, and that's why I try to write about as often as I possibly can when I see it. And I was like, it is the most condescending stuff I've ever seen. I've been paying attention to politics, and I've shifted on my political views to a certain extent, but really truly waking up alongside the media just being overtly condescending to regular people has been like one of the most shocking things, and they cannot see it. They don't see at all how condescending and how egotistical they turned out to be. So that's where I try to be the rational voice of the regular people who just like, these people are full of shit and they don't actually care about us. And they wouldn't treat us this way if they actually did.
Well said. Well, where can people find you, Adam?
Definitely go to my Substack, adambcoleman.com. It'll bring you to my Substack page. I have some political stuff, some very personal stuff, things that make you think. I'm all over the place in my articles and what I choose to publish to give people stuff to think about and show who I am on a much more deeper level. Definitely check out Wrong Speak Publishing. That's our outlet. You know, we're trying to give people a chance to be heard, and we take submissions from people. We're starting to develop a journalism aspect as well. So we now have, I believe, 8 journalists now who are part of our fold, giving them a chance to find things that are interesting, not chase clickbait, not talk about trans stuff 24/7, you know, but things that can be actually fruitful. And my book, Black Victim, the Black Victor, is on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. They can check out the book, and we're getting into book publishing as well. So definitely check out the Luminescence Manual. That is our second book outside of my book that we just published, and it's kind of like an Orwellian fictional story, but talks about the media and the power that they can hold over people.
Awesome. Adam, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope to have you on again because there's so much more I want to talk to you about. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Liebowitz. Remember, let me know what you think. Till next time.